Welcome to Reimagining Miami Gardens. In this groundbreaking podcast dissertation, we examine the profound impact of leadership on government with a specific focus on how it shapes the city of Miami Gardens. Through insightful interviews, in-depth analysis, and compelling narratives, we uncover the intricate dynamics between leadership and governance, highlighting the transformative power of effective leadership in shaping the trajectory of a city. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore the role of leadership in driving positive change and development in the now vibrant community of Miami Gardens.
Welcome to Reimagining Miami Gardens podcast. I'm Oliver G. Gilbert, the chairman of the Miami-Dade County Board of County Commissioners and the former mayor of the young and vibrant city of Miami Gardens. I'm excited to dive into the complexities of leadership in driving positive change in cities. Today, we embark on a journey to explore the challenges and opportunities faced by newly formed cities, such as the city of Miami Gardens, in their quest for transformation. In our study, we aim to address the pressing issues that hinder city progress, from bureaucratic obstacles to limited resources, and the critical role that leadership plays in overcoming these challenges. The purpose of our research and the discussions on this podcast is to uncover the strategies employed by city leaders to drive successful transformation initiatives and provide insights into the essential elements of effective leadership in urban development. Join me as we navigate through the intricacies of city management, through policy and administration, examine the importance of collaboration and strategic decision-making, and uncover the valuable lessons learned from successful city transformation initiatives. Together, let's explore the transformative power of leadership in shaping the future of our cities. Today, we will discuss the vital role of a city's image in shaping its identity and fostering community pride. We will look at the communication strategies that were effective in creating a city's brand. And joining me today, as always, is Theresa, the former city manager of North Miami and the current chief operating officer for the county commission.
Chairman, how are you?
It's a good day. It's a good day. It's a good day to be in Miami Gardens.
All right. Well, let's get started. One of the key things in just running a city and being part of a city is communication. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that and kind of how you've been able to communicate messages internally, externally, and also to everyone else and the residents and stakeholders so that you can create the brand of the city that you would like. So first, let's kind of start with how you ensured effective internal messaging within the city government during your tenure as mayor.
They got to hear it from me. What I found was, having been on the city council and having been around the city since its creation, was that there was always this layer, and the city form of government isn't, absent some responsibility. The city's form of government was listed as a mayor, manager, council form of government. And always look at those structures. Those structures are always important because the mayor would hire the manager subject to confirmation by the city council for voting. The manager would be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the city. The mayor would run the meetings and also vote with the council members. Well, when the initial mayor and the initial manager, how they had it set up was he was always responsible for all discussions, conversations, everything with the city's employees. And the mayor just really kind of served as a figurehead, a leader for, I guess, ceremonial purposes, but also the person who ran the council meetings. And so my view of it was just different. When I read the charter, what I saw is that it was the council's budget. It was the council's budget, and that the mayor was responsible for bringing it. And so I interpreted it differently, and I took that interpretation to the manager and I said, well, listen, I appreciate the fact that they all work for you, but they're like the subcontractors. You're the contractor. I'm the architect. Ultimately, you are building what I design. And so they're going to hear from me. They need to hear from you. So, and it's interesting because in cities you have this leadership sometimes. You have leadership, and it'll probably be in a lot of different organizations where there are leaders who are at the very top, and then you'll have other, high-ranking leaders and middle management leaders, but people never really hear the vision. They never really hear the vision from the visionary, from the person who's actually trying to accomplish a goal, whether that goal is maintaining the status quo or being transformative. They never hear from that person. Well, they were going to hear from me. They were going to understand that I was going to be the person who, if they were wrong, was going to stand up for them. Or I was wrong. If they were right, I was going to stand up for them. If they were wrong, I was going to be the person to say, hey, listen, that's not acceptable. Because ultimately, I understood that when people look at cities, and even if the mayor is exactly the same as every other council member, they see the mayor differently. I understood that. I understood how to leverage that from a communication perspective and from political perspective and ultimately from an administrative perspective.
And so when you say communicate directly, you spoke to employees. Did you have meetings? How did you talk to them?
I remember when I first started, I said, hey, I want to meet with this department. And the first manager, he said, no. I was like, well, listen, I really wasn't asking. I'm going to give them breakfast. I'm going to come in. I'm going to sit with them. They're going to tell me what it is they do. And I'm going to tell them what it is I expect. So they're going to hear from me. They're going to understand there's a level of expectation and accountability that is going to come from the mayor. And so I remember the first manager saying, well, no, that's not within your purview. I said, well, ultimately, city councils are the chief interpreter of a city charter, not the city manager. And I interpret that it is. And so that's what's going to happen. And that was one of the first interactions we had about employees. But I needed to be clear that they were going to know who I was, how I saw the city, and what I expected from them, and how we were in this together.
No, I think that's important because when you talk about a city, you might have a city manager, but people look to say, what's the mayor doing, right? And so you have to take on the responsibility of that. What was your main vision that you would tell them? Tell me what you told the employees about what you saw Miami Gardens could be.
I wouldn't be a steward of the status quo. I would not be a steward of the status quo. And me as the mayor of this city, I didn't get elected for us to be exactly where we are and do exactly what we were doing. That's not what I said to people when I asked them to vote for me. That I saw greater in us. And that part of the problem is they didn't see greater in us. I needed them to understand how I saw my hometown and what my expectations were, and I communicated that. And I gave everybody a chance. Listen, this might not be the ship you want to be on. This is the direction the ship is going in. If you don't want to go there, then don't go there. Get off the ship. I'm comfortable with that. I won't be mad at you. That's not my issue. But my issue is when I stand in front of people and I tell them what we can become, that they are owed my earnest efforts in all ways to accomplish that. And I need you all to do that. Like, I need you. You're important. I remember those conversations with parks workers and crossing guards and police officers about how the city was better than people knew. And we're going to even be better than that. And they could start having pride in that. Because I wasn't going to ever say, oh, I'm the mayor of Miami Gardens and whisper it. I'm the mayor of Miami Gardens. It's the largest black city in the state of Florida. It's the third largest city in Miami-Dade County. We're a city that was created. When we were created, they said we'd be a borrower. We ended up being a lender. We're a city they said could not make it. The city that ultimately I left as an all-American city. That's what they said, but this is what we did. I knew it could happen, and I told them that. And they didn't have to believe in anything but me. Just believe in me. And if you just believe in me, understand that I will do everything to make this happen.
How did you honestly get feedback from employees? Because when they see a mayor, they're scared to speak. And then there's that dynamic of, do I speak? And then my manager. So how did you get them to tell you and give you feedback? I was born and raised in Miami Gardens, and so I got a lot of whispers at first. Like they would pull me aside. Hey, listen, Mayor, I know this is what they said, but this is what's really happening. And I appreciate it. Just don't worry. I won't tell anybody you said it. I'm just going to go in there. I'm going to figure it out.
So at first, it started with the whisper. It started with the whisper. But then after a while, because it started with the whisper because people weren't sure whether you protect them. People really just don't. They want to do right, but they want to be protected. So they want to be able to tell you something knowing the manager's not going to fire them. But they understand that you can't hire or fire them. So the only thing you have is the manager's fear of you. So they needed to know whether this mayor had the desire and or ability politically to actually fire that manager before they put their necks out there. And we established that pretty quickly.
And that's when you did the change of managers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well.
So from that point, with your internal messaging, how do you think the employees saw Miami Gardens changing when you became mayor?
I think you saw the change. So one of the things is things changed, but you saw the change. So part of the imaging of the city changed because the city kind of accepted my brand. So my brand was a fairly popular brand. Everything was orange and green. So everything the city did from that point became orange and green. Because what we found in our polling was that people's impression of the city wasn't necessarily that high, but people's impression, the voters of the city, of me, was extraordinarily high. So we just had to link the city to me until the city could catch up. And then eventually the city did. And so it started to look different. Everything we did was going to be done in a way that it was reflective of my style. And so it was one of those situations where, no, we're not going to look like we're this half-assed city. That's not who we are. We're not going to look like we don't care. Everything we do, we're going to do with pride. And it's going to look that way. We're not going to whisper. We're going to yell. We're not going to walk. We're going to run. We're going to run through the tape every time. And that enthusiasm becomes contagious. That enthusiasm becomes contagious with employees, and they start to come up with ideas about, hey, why don't we offer this flag football when football is off? Okay, well, I met this group, and they offer gymnastics. Can we partner with them? Sure. We have this community center. We don't use it. What do you think about doing this? Well, you know what? Let's do it. They start to come up with ideas. They just needed to know that somebody would have their back, and they needed to know that someone's going to lean forward instead of sitting back. And leaning forward as a leader is really important, especially when you need to be transformative. You can't relax into transformation. You just can't. You can't lay down into transformation. You just can't. You have to actually lean forward. You have to walk forward. You have to move forward. You have to be aggressive. And so all of those things came kind of naturally to me. Like it was, and I carried the weight of expectation. I'm a kid at this point who is born and raised in the city that he's the mayor of. So I don't have the luxury of hiding away. I didn't move from someplace else. Some of these people babysat me. I went to school with these people. I'm on the parks with these people. I shop with these people. When we out in the clubs, I'm out in the clubs with these people. My church is in the community. No, this is my home. I can't hide from this. And hiding isn't my personality, so I'm going to do something I'm proud to tell you about. And that became the mantra from the internal perspective of the city.
And honestly, you're pretty popular in the city. If you go to Miami Gardens, many employees are always coming up and saying, "Mayor," and you're always mayor. So we've seen that. Let's talk a little bit about kind of your external messaging, right? I think earlier we've talked about this, how Miami Gardens was viewed at one point. How did you approach kind of effectively communicating with residents about how they should talk about Miami Gardens?
Well, I start correcting them. First of all, there's this myth that you can't, if you are an elected official and someone says something that's wrong, you can't correct them. You just have to let them yell at you and let them say, that's not going to be me. You say some crazy stuff, you're getting corrected on spot. You get instant feedback. Because what I can't have said was they said that Miami Gardens was murder gardens in the presence of the mayor, and the mayor said nothing. Because your silence is acquiescence. I will never acquiesce to something like that. So I'm built to fight that point. And so what I found previously was people took that, hey, well, we just have to let them express themselves. No, that's not what leaders do. You get to say it, but then you get the value of my leadership. I don't work for any one person. I don't work for one person. Everybody say, well, we're your boss. We pay you. No. I work for the city. I work for the people in entirety, the people who showed up to vote and the people who didn't, the people who showed up to complain and the people who didn't, the people who are happy and the people who are unhappy. I owe the whole body politic my best judgment. And that doesn't mean letting you yell at me. That does not mean acquiescing to what you want because you are here. It definitely doesn't mean allowing you to paint an inaccurate picture of my city because I didn't want to hurt your feelings or lose a vote. I'll lose the vote. The vote's fine. I'll be fine. What you're not going to do is sit here and talk about the city in my presence and I don't defend it. And so my ability to defend the city internally first, getting that taken care of, and then externally. And then I remember like challenging people who would say stuff. I remember it was so interesting one time that somebody from Miami Beach said, well, y'all have a lot of murders there. And I thought to myself, well, okay. And I said, well, don't you all have more rapes than any place in the state? We don't call you the rape capital of Florida. What we're not going to do is define anything or anybody by their very worst characteristic, especially when it's a minority of the thing that actually happened. And I would remind the public of that. It's that when people say, oh, Miami Gardens, when they say Miami Gardens, I always ask them, what are you? What do you do? Oh, I'm an electrician. I'm a teacher. I'm a lawyer. I'm a vice president of a bank. All people who live in Miami Gardens. I'm a vice president of a university, live in Miami Gardens. I'm an accountant, live in Miami Gardens. I said, when they say Miami Gardens is violent, you understand they're not talking about the streets, the parks, the trees, the buildings, the red lights. They're talking about the people. They're talking about you. And if you adopt that messaging, if you adopt that paradigm, you are admitting that you are violent. What is your truth? What is your truth? And knowing what your truth is matters. Understanding who they're talking about matters. And when you start to make it personal, every time the news says something and they say Miami Gardens, they're talking about you. And that that's not you. You know that that's not the vast majority of people in Miami Gardens. So don't let them capture, 115,000 people with the actions of 25? In what world is that okay? And then starting to push back, like we'd have this interesting thing. Miami Gardens is a big city, but not nearly as big as the bad stories that have been attributed to us. So you'd have stuff happen way down by 75, 20 minutes outside of Miami Gardens, but it was on Miami Gardens Drive. And so they say Miami Gardens. And then we ask them to correct it, and they say right outside Miami Gardens. And then we say, well, hey, actually, technically, it's closer to Miami Lakes and Hialeah. Well, in the Miami Gardens area, no, still not close. Okay, in North Dade. They didn't want to say anybody else's name. They wanted to give us that. I remember that a shooting happened on a park, and I'm getting all these calls from news people. I'm like, why are they calling us? This park is actually in the city of North Miami Beach. It is a North Miami Beach park. It's their park. Why do they think this is Miami Gardens? Because the area is black? It's not our park. So the pushback had to be more to more than just the residents. It had to be to other institutions who felt like they knew who we were, but independent of that, they had an interest in characterizing us a certain way.
So you spent a lot of time kind of clarifying.
We say it very nicely. You're so polite. I spend a lot of time cussing people out. I mean, this isn't. Yeah, I'm not a sipping tea. That's not who I am. You're not going to do this to us. I remember when we started having those meetings with the Miami Herald, their editorial board, and I was just taking all of their mistakes. I would have highlighted versions of this is where you said Miami Gardens wasn't true. This when you said the crime rate was this, but it was really this. I would edit them, take it into them, and tell them this is where you messed up, and this is the problem. If you only say these things happen in Miami Gardens, people think that we're bad. Now, if you want to say that things happen in Miami Gardens, but then you want to call out the city of Miami, and you want to call out Miami Beach, and you want to call them out for all of their crime also, then that's cool because now there's crime everywhere. But if you only say when it happens to Miami Gardens, and a good example is this. Something happens in Miami Gardens, they say city of Miami Gardens. Okay, it was in Miami Gardens. Something happens in the city of Miami and they say Northwest Dade. They say Northwest Dade. Look, by virtue of their size, the city of Miami has more crime than every city in Dade County. But you don't hear about it. You hear Northwest Dade. That's what you
think
hear.
Miami Gardens.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in Northwest Dade. And so I was in tuned enough to where things happened and how they happened and how they reported to notice it and start to call them out on it. You know, and it was little things like with the Hard Rock Stadium and the Dolphins and how the games were always, you know, the Dolphins live from Miami. The Dolphins live from Miami Beach. No. I remember leaving my house, going to the stadium during a game because I was watching the game and they said the city of Dolphins live from Miami. And I went there. I talked to the vice president. He took me to talk to the people in the booth, the broadcasters, and they made the correction. So now it's like little things that gave people pride because now when people saw the Super Bowl live from Miami Gardens, the residents went absolutely crazy over that because they understood that I had made them say Miami Gardens. Like, you're not going to play with me. And so all of those things kind of worked together. It was not just one little thing. It was that we started sending out our emails. I built a huge email list to our residents. I opened up a social media presence for us that became very, very, very proactive because my social media was proactive. And we just piggybacked on it. It's like, come on, we'll do it. So we're going to communicate in different ways because we can't count on somebody else to tell our story. And if I had one piece of advice for cities, young or old, that get a lot of bad press, don't let them be the only teller of the story. If they're going to tell a story and you can't control it, you fight that point with them, but then you tell the story. And we're built for that in this age. In this age, there's no one thing that can control a narrative. They can put it on the website, so can we. They can put it on Twitter or X, so can we. They can put it on Instagram, so can we. They can have a station, we can have a YouTube channel. You can buy billboards, I can buy billboards too. You got a radio station, we got one too. I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to tell my story because I understand that what you're telling of me is a narrative, first of all, that is untrue, but it's not something that's sustainable for us. And communicating that very aggressively, consistently, not backing down, always pushing back. This is what we're going to do.
And really, a lot of the external messaging has been helpful to the city in terms of building and creating events that people see and want to come to Miami Gardens. And I just want to throw out there Jazz in the Gardens, because I can remember one of the first ones. And when I look at it now, it's got thousands and thousands of visitors. Talk to me about how it started and how you developed it over the years.
So Shirley started Jazz in the Gardens, our first mayor, in a parking lot in Hard Rock Stadium. They say it was 1,700 people. It was more like 170. It wasn't a lot of people at all. But she had seen a jazz festival up in River Beach Festival. And I remember I was driving her around. Now, I wasn't even on the council. And she saw something. She saw it. She had the vision to see it. And she said, no, we can do this. And so her and the first council, they do it. The city might have been a year old when they started. It was just for the residents. But when I took over Jazz in the Gardens and when I became mayor, what I said was, I enjoy concerts and I enjoy parties as much as anyone else. But what I want to do is use this concert, this festival, to reintroduce ourselves to the entire world. And so we invested in it, and we invested in promoting it and bringing better stars. And then we would take me to places like New York and Atlanta and the Carolinas, and we put me on radio and television stations because it gave me a chance to talk about the festival. But I really wasn't talking about the festival. I was really talking about the city. Because my thought was, this is how we say hello to the world, Jazz in the Gardens. But once we get you here and you have this great time, we have all of South Florida to entice you. Whether it's investment, whether it's moving, whether it's just changing your mind about who we are. We can do that. And so we use Jazz in the Gardens as a tool. People said, I remember some residents complained, it doesn't make money. Okay, but a lot of things we do don't make money in cities. We're not predicated on making money. It's serving a purpose. And there's some lessons in that. Look, there are things that you can do with public dollars that people will complain about. And people should always have the ability to complain and voice their opinion. Understand that most things we do aren't going to make money. But that's not the test. The actual test in law is whether there's a valid public purpose. And is there a valid public purpose in using this entertainment instrument, this festival, this concert, to actually boost morale in a city and boost the reputation of a city? At the same time, of course there is. Cities and governments pay hundreds of millions of dollars a year to advertise themselves. This is just how we choose to do it. And so it served the purpose of letting people have fun and enjoy themselves, recruiting people, getting people to come here to South Florida from really all over the world at some point, but also to redefine Miami Gardens. Because we didn't just wasn't just advertised in places that weren't here. It was advertised here. It was talked about here. So I got to be on all of our local stations, in the local Herald, and talking about Miami Gardens and what we're doing at Jazz in the Gardens.
Well, and it's a big deal to have a huge event that's actually a safe event, right?
Yeah.
But Jazz in the Gardens kind of, and you can think of Essence Festival and New Orleans, and now when people say Jazz in the Gardens, they say Miami Gardens, right? So they know where it is. Did you make any decisions about what kind of audience that you wanted to get the attention to Miami Gardens? Did you think about that throughout the time where you're trying to amplify the brand? I needed
it all. I mean, the core audience was always older and older R&B, but I understand that that's a recessive population, because ultimately they're getting older, and so they'll stop coming out as much. So I knew that we needed to make it younger, and so I did. And so I felt like we could make it younger and draw in new people, and also, have folks who traditionally would come to Jazz in the Gardens come, and it worked.
In terms of your kind of communication channels, what communication channels, either social media, press releases, your emails, or community events, do you think and you would advise is one of the strongest communication methods?
We flooded people with emails a lot. We did a lot of emails. So I don't know how effective it was. Well, it was effective in this respect. They understood that we weren't an inactive city. So one thing that it could do, even if they don't, people aren't going to read all those emails. So we would still send all the emails because people would know, man, them Miami Gardens people, they always doing something. They got a cleanup here. They got a food giveaway here. They got parks program for your kids here. They're getting 10 emails a day. So we're doing a lot. So it actually demonstrated our activity. What I found when I was mayor was Facebook was better for us when I was mayor. And the emails probably were the best. But generally, the thing that really moved the crowds was probably me going and talking to people. So just basic 101. Put me in front of your church and let me be the messenger. And so we overused me in some respect as a messenger. And so I became synonymous with Miami Gardens. So much so that people really didn't necessarily identify with other elected officials who were elected and doing good jobs. But I became synonymous with Miami Gardens. And so we used me as a messenger a lot. I would go to homeowner associations. I was big in churches. And it wasn't just me promoting the city. I would go to present sympathy resolutions, because showing that your city mayor cares about your family when you're in your bereavement is important. Like just me offering a kind word and a hug and saying that our community is diminished because we've lost one of our own. Just that understanding, it affected how people felt about me and how people feel about the city. And so I did it. So I think Facebook was good. I think the emails probably helped a lot. But what shaped kind of the turnaround in how people perceived us was they actually got to hear somebody and see somebody represent the city, who was young, who was from the city, who, I'm going to be down to earth, I'm going to have fun with you. You know, they got to see me on the sidelines of youth football games, running up and down when their kids scored touchdowns. They got to see that. I visited every school every year in the entire city.
You still do?
Yeah, I still do. So those kids would come home with pictures of their mayor with them. And the kids would love it, and the parents would love it. And so that level of engagement was helpful in shaping the narrative.
I think that brings me kind of to what you have described in previous times, communal self-esteem. Talk to me about what you feel that is and why that's so important in a community, and how did you communicate with residents to inspire that sense of ownership?
It was really just like what I said before, letting them know that it was them. It's easy to think something poorly of Miami Gardens if you're in Miami Gardens and you don't understand that you are Miami Gardens. I remember I had this shirt that made up and it said, Miami Gardens. And it was M-Y-A-M-I, Gardens. It's Miami Gardens. It's mine. So connecting them to that thing, and they knew that's not who they were. And so in a lot of ways, it was a trick, right? Because I made them start defending the city because I made them start defending themselves. And I made them realize that when they talk about the city, they're talking about you. They're talking about you. And so I would never run away from the fact that there is crime and there are bad people. But I also would never blame a large population for the actions of a relative few. Like that seemed wrong. And it doesn't seem like things we do in other areas. So they weren't doing that in Miami. They weren't doing that on Miami Beach. Why are you doing it in Miami Gardens? And for a while there, why were they doing it in places like North Miami?
North Miami.
Yeah. No, you still, working class community, by and large, safe, but you have a couple of bad incidents. Oh my God.
Everything's over there.
Everything's bad. Yeah, everything's bad there. No, let's not let them do that.
What advice would you give to current and future leaders that are looking to cultivate that community pride and empowerment? And particularly, I want to go I want your advice for the leader who's probably not as vocal as you.
What advice would I give to trying to cultivate that environment and they're not as vocal? If you're not as vocal, show them. So I used to do something else. When we have cleanups, I would go out there and I would pick up the trash. Like I would have a bag. I'd have gloves. I'd be picking up the trash. It was going to be me. You got to see me doing it. So even if I didn't say a word, it said everything. Show them that it's going to be you. Show them how invested you are in this. If you can't say it, let them see it still. Your actions will say it. Show them. If you go to that homegoing service, and if you can't counsel them with your words, hold them in your arms. You can still show them, but they need to know how invested you are in them and the community. They have to know that. And I would say that it's important because ultimately the long game is what we can accomplish together. But in order for us to accomplish it together, there has to be an acknowledgement that we are actually together. That means I need your buy-in.
Talking about some of branding, can you share some examples of some of the successful branding initiatives that you had in Miami Gardens?
Everything around Jazz in the Gardens, everything around Keep Miami Gardens, beautiful. Things in the civic engagement department. We invested a ton of money in youth football, and people didn't understand why, but we're the best now. We're the best youth football program in the state, in the country, really, probably. And so different programs in the city of Miami Gardens, well, every time those kids go out and play, they're ambassadors. And while they were playing here in Miami-Dade County, that's great. But now they fly out to California and Nevada and Atlanta and all these other places and beat up on people in football. And they're all the Miami Gardens Ravens, the Miami Gardens Chiefs. People didn't see that as branding, but boy, was it. Because now people who might not have ever heard of Miami Gardens know that we have the best youth football team in the country. Now they know about Miami Gardens.
And quite frankly, when it came to football, it was just kind of Florida, right?
Yeah.
Florida had its own, you have Florida, you have Texas, you have California. But now there's very specific that not just in Florida, but in Miami Gardens specifically, you can find great players.
Yes.
How did you involve your businesses and other stakeholders in upholding the city's brand identity?
Yeah, it was tough because when I became mayor, we had kind of an anti-business reputation. And the very first thing I said was, I'm not that. Like, I think the city should move at the speed of business, so I want to move faster for you. And so I would engage them directly. It's that basic retail politics. Let them meet me, let them know me. So that was the first thing. The second thing was develop good business, policies. There was this idea previously that you had to have policies that were good for business and policies that were good for the community. And my theory is that you can have policies that are good for business and the community, and that businesses are, in fact, a part of the community. Communities aren't just people. It's all the other institutions that are attendant to large areas. So you needed to have policies that were good for both, and you need to not be afraid to speak to that, not be afraid to explain that to residents. So when residents would come and they'd be like, well, no, it's just these businesses. No, hold on, stop. We need businesses. No, I need businesses. I need them in this tax base. I need this in these warehouses. I need this industrial zone land. I need that entertainment. I need this. You need it too. Let me explain to you why. You want to actually have your mother, your grandmother go to a park and have a service. Your kid go to a park and have a service, but you don't want to actually pay the whole amount that it takes to provide that service. Well, when they pay their millage rate, it's interesting because they actually pay the same millage rate that you're going to be paying, but they pay it on a value that's probably a lot higher. They don't have any deductions and cost us a lot less money to service them. So the money I don't use servicing them, I can use servicing you. That's why you need those. So it was fiscal components of that you have to be able to speak to residents about. So then they knew, and everybody want to talk about business, but you want to drive other places to go to a restaurant. You want to drive other places to go to a store. That's like having an added amount to your mortgage because you got to add in gas for all the time and time for all those other places you got to go because you can't do it right here in your hometown. No, we got to have these things. They create jobs, they create opportunity, they create commerce. We have to have these things. It's a part of every vibrant community. And so before people were afraid to be painted anti-business, I reshaped the political narrative such that business was a part of the community. And so now you have a slew of Miami Gardens elected officials, and none of them are anti-business, and they don't even pretend like they're anti-business because we've reshaped the narrative so that people understand, the business is an important component of what we have to do and how we're going to be successful.
So in general, how did you measure your effectiveness of reimagining Miami Gardens and it debranding and being better?
I mean, ending as an all-American city was one thing. But when people started to talk differently about it, there was a turning point when people started, when we stopped chasing developers and they started chasing us. And so what I know about that is just that they do their homework. If they're chasing us now, they know that it's a good deal. They know there's a good opportunity. And so because things like that happen, I knew that we had dented it because that's not where we were. So I could see the change in their behavior. I could see the change in the behavior of folks as they interacted with us.
Sustainability, right? Being able to sustain what you've done. I mean, you took Miami Gardens to nearly its 20th anniversary. Mm-hmm. And what do you think that you've put in place that's allowed the new leadership that you're not a part of to continue on Miami Gardens as it was when you left?
Well, it's interesting. I'm not a part of the leadership, but I'm the chair of the county commission. The county commission represents the city. So I still maintain a fairly large political footprint in Miami Gardens. One of the things that I was fond of doing also, though, is putting things in place that were hard to undo. So the general obligation bond that requires us to build out parks and provide activities, they have to do it. It's the bond. They have to do these things. So putting things in place, and that's where designing the city from a policy perspective was important. You know, I want to have a police department that was organic and homegrown. So it took all of those years, but I kept sending classes no matter what. Even when the money was tight, send some classes. Because I knew that I could keep adding officers. So now if you want to dilute that, you can, but it would take a long time. So put those things. Go ahead and change the land use. So don't do special exceptions or variances. Change the zoning. Change the land use. And as you change the land use, folks actually start to develop it. Don't get into the one-offs. Change it for everything. So that now those people who acquire those properties have vested rights to do these specific things. It becomes a lot more difficult to back out of those. That is a planning mechanism. And so I looked at it from a perspective, I did everything from a perspective that I wouldn't be here forever. So there were policy changes in Miami Gardens that support how I see Miami Gardens and how I want Miami Gardens to grow. So if the new council and new mayor did absolutely nothing, just based on the land use, business will continue to move to Miami Gardens. They just have to really let the ship go. It has a path. Let it go. And what I found about people is if something is working and they're getting credit for it, typically they're cool with it. And so that's kind of what's happened.
In 5 words or less, describe the city of Miami Gardens today.
In 5 words or less, the city is growing forward.
Nice. All right. So as we close, and this is our final episode, I'm glad we've had the opportunity to speak. I just want you to take a moment to kind of reflect on the many leadership styles and principles that we have identified as we discussed reimagining Miami Gardens. What are some of your thoughts, and reflect on a couple that you think would probably be real important?
It's been everything from great man to authentic to servant leadership. And what I guess this is what I would say too, because we started this project to try to help people who needed to be transformative in young cities, but cities generally. And we wanted to analyze the different leadership styles and how they could actually help. Which style could actually help. And I guess what we discovered is it really just depends on the moment. It's so situational. There were times when I needed to be the great man. I needed it. They needed me to be it. When they needed someone who they believe was born for this moment, who was the one person who could do it. That's why you still get you're going to forever be the mayor, no matter what. And people say that in front of the current mayor.
They do.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. It's very awkward, actually. It's pretty awkward. So there were times when that had to happen. They had to see that strength in me. But then there were, but then this servant leadership, how I could actually, just how I worked and how I listened and how we actually did this together. There was times when that was appropriate. There was times when the visionary is always important. But how it works and how you implement it is really depending on the moment. I would say to young leaders, young administrators, is to be willing to do it all. Do whatever it takes in the moment. Because ultimately you're goal oriented. And I set my goal to be transformative. And that's what we did. I used every tool in the toolbox to keep my word. I told them I'd leave them in All-American City. I was being literal. They thought I was joking. I left them in All-American City. I told them that I would leave them with reserves. They thought it was impossible until I left them with 47% reserves. They told them that, hey, listen, when they said we were violent, I said we will be nowhere on this list. No one thought it was possible. But we weren't anywhere on that list. Because in those different areas, whatever was required, I did. You have to be flexible. Sometimes as leaders, you feel like you have to be certain. You have to be confident enough to be flexible. Be confident enough to surround yourself with talented people. People who are as smart or smarter than you. Be confident enough to say, oh, you know what, I messed that up. And change courses. Be confident enough to do whatever it takes. You're not the wall. You're the water that finds a way through. Be the water that finds a way through.
Thank you for listening to Reimagining Miami Gardens. Join us for our next episode as we dive into the leadership principles that guided the transformation of Miami Gardens into the vibrant city it is today. Until then,